YouTube Premium gives you ad-free videos, mobile downloads and background play. With it, you also get YouTube Music Premium, a music streaming app that has playlists mixed just for you and the world's largest catalogue of songs to enjoy uninterrupted. Try YouTube Premium for 1 month on us and get into what you're into.
finns inga regler, inga ramar.
Hi, my name is Anina, and I would like to give you a few reasons why you should consider dating a young Slavic lady.
If you clicked on this video, you're probably looking to learn about what you're supposed to do on a certain boss or all bosses in Black Temple. There's a whopping 9 bosses in this raid, so let's not waste any more time and get right into it. So to start off, the trash in this instance is not very hard at all, but when there's something dangerous worth mentioning, I will definitely mention it in this video. And the first dangerous pack you'll meet is right before the first boss. This pack isn't super hard, but the reason why people usually wipe on it is because they don't know that the Coil Scar generals have an ability called Free Friend that removes any CC you would do on any mob. So instead of CCing, just stack everything and mark something to kill. Generally, people kill the soothsayers first as they heal. Okay, now for High Warlord Nagentis. There's 3 main important abilities in this fight: Needle Spine, Impaling Spine, and Tidal Shield. Needle Spine is a simple ability that the boss casts on 3 random players. The thing is, once a player is hit, it also deals damage to other nearby players. So range DPS should really be spread as much as possible in a cone behind the boss. Melees should be stacked behind the boss to minimize damage too if they're hit. Next up, you have Impaling Spine. About every 20 seconds, the boss will target a random player and throw a spine on him. This will deal 4 to 5k damage on impact and then applies a dot that takes for 2.7k every 3 seconds. The thing is, another player can actually remove the spine from the player hit by it, by clicking on it. Once you remove a spine from a player, it will go to your inventory. Make sure you know where it went in your inventory to deal with the next ability. The final ability is Tidal Shield. About every 60 seconds, the boss will cast this on him, becoming immune to any damage and healing himself. The way you remove this shield is by having a player throw a spine that they grabbed earlier onto the boss. But once you do that, the shield will break and it will deal 8.5k frost damage to the whole raid. So before doing this, make sure everyone is topped off, or at least above 8.5k HP. But you also don't want to wait too long since the boss heals himself as the shield is active. So the moment the shield becomes active, healers should start topping off everyone ASAP. But that's not just a healer job. Make sure to have everyone grab a Hellstone before the fight and use it once the shield goes on the boss to be able to break it ASAP. Nagentis will enrage after 8 minutes, but that's pretty much all the fight. Moving up to the next boss, remember that you can not only mount up in this next big room, but you can also skip most of the trash. I do suggest pulling any flying orcs around the boss area though, so you don't pull them accidentally during the fight. Okay, Supremus. This boss is pretty easy, but a lot of people will die from standing where they shouldn't shouldn't. So during phase 1 for Supremus, you need 2 tanks constantly alive. One tank will hold threat on the boss, and the second tank will soak Hateful Strikes, which is a melee attack that deals 27 to 32k damage to the next player with the highest current health within melee range. So needless to say, healers stay on top of the off tank at all times, otherwise he will die and melees will start falling one after the other. Also, during phase 1 you have Molten Flames. It's a blue trail of fire that starts from Supremus' feet and moves in a straight line towards a random player. Obviously, move out of that ASAP. After 60 seconds, Supremus switches to phase 2. On phase 2, you have 2 abilities to deal with. The first one, and the one that will be the source of most deaths during this fight, is the volcanoes. There will be a few volcanoes spawning around the room and spitting fireballs that deal 4 to 5k damage per second to any target within 15 yards of the volcano. Move out of that ASAP. The second ability during phase 2 is Gaze. About every 10 seconds, the boss will fixate a player and start running towards him. If the boss reaches said player, he or she will very likely be one shot. So if you're targeted by this, make sure to run away from the boss, but also avoid any volcanoes on the ground. And you don't need to worry too much about being too close to the boss during this phase, because if you're targeted and you're in melee range, you will be knocked back and dealt 5k damage to. So it is recommended to be away from the boss at all times, but not absolutely necessary. Keep DPSing the boss mostly. Those 2 phases will keep alternating about every 60 seconds until the boss is dead. Moving up to Shade of Akama. This is probably among the easiest bosses in the game, and some don't even consider it a boss, so I'm not gonna waste too much time on it. Basically, you start the fight by talking to Akama, and your goal will be to kill all the Ashtongue channelers, banishing the Shade of Akama. Once you do that, the Shade of Akama will move to Akama himself, and you'll need to quickly deal with it before it kills him, and that's pretty much it. That being said, there will be waves of mobs spawning all throughout the fight. They're really not that hard, and you can choose to deal with them how you see fit. Either stack all of them and AoE them down, or split your raid in 3 groups, one for each of the 2 doors and one for dealing with the channelers. But yeah, once that's done and you kill the boss, you'll unlock a teleport from the entrance of the raid to outside this room, where you can repair and get to the next bosses quickly if you wipe, so make sure to use it. Okay, next up we have Terran Gorefiend. So Gorefiend is a very simple fight, and for the most part your one goal is to kill him as fast as possible. So lust as soon as you engage him, pump all your cooldowns at the start, rinse and repeat until he's dead. That being said, during this fight there is one ability that will be aimed at a random player, and if that first player that gets targeted by this doesn't know how to deal with this, you will definitely wipe. That ability is Shadow of Death. So every 30 seconds, a random raid member will receive the Shadow of Death debuff. After 55 seconds, the debuff will turn the player into a ghost, and it will also spawn 4 shadowy constructs at the location where that happens. Your goal if you're targeted by this is to run away as far away from the raid as possible, and kill those constructs before they reach the boss and wipe everyone. To do that, you have a bar with 5 abilities. First off, I want you to completely ignore Spirit Strike and Spirit Shield, the spells on number 1 and number 7 respectively. The moment the constructs spawn, you want to AoE them down instantly using Spirit Volley, number 5 on your pet bar. After that, you want to root them using Spirit Chains on number 4. At this point, what you want to do is target one, cast 2 Spirit Lenses on him, tap to the next one, cast 2 Spirit Lenses, tap to the next one, etc. Once Spirit Volley is off cooldown, use it again, followed by Spirit Chains again, then cast 2 Spirit Lenses on a target, tap to the next one, etc. Rinse and repeat until all the mobs are dead. Once the first player targeted by this debuff manages to the moment the constructs spawn, you want to AoE them down instantly using Spirit Volley, number 5 on your pet bar. After that, you want to root them using Spirit Chains on number 4. At this point, what you want to do is target one, cast 2 Spirit Lenses on him, tap to the next one, cast 2 Spirit Lenses, tap to the next one, etc. Once Spirit Volley is off cooldown, use it again, followed by Spirit Chains again, then cast 2 Spirit Lenses on a target, tap to the next one, etc. Rinse and repeat until all the mobs are dead. Once the first player targeted by this debuff manages to do this, the following times where Shadow of Death happens are very simple to deal with, because there's always going to be 2 ghosts active at any given time from there, so they can gang up on the constructs and kill them very easily. The first ghost is the one that has to nail it to not have a wipe. And actually, if you want to practice this in advance, there's actually a very fun flash game that will teach you how to deal with this ability. If you still have a lot of people struggling with this in your guild, I highly suggest linking this to them. Link for this will be in the description of this video. After you're done with this boss, you have the choice between 2 bosses, Gurtog Blood Boil or Reliquary of Souls. We're gonna start with Gurtog here, but before you get to him, there's one trash worth talking about, the Bone Chewer Behemoth. For this, you want everyone to stack up behind the mob as he uses Meteor and also does a stump which deals 4k damage and stuns everyone for 3 seconds. But don't worry about that, it's more important to stack to soak the Meteor. Okay, so Gurtog Blood Boil. This fight is not a DPS race but more a battle for survival and a tough healer gear check. So for this fight, you want 3 tanks. It is possible but more difficult with 2. Let's explain tank stuff real quick. First off, all 3 tanks must equip full mitigation, and they also need to be always the top 3 on the threat list, so they must fight each other for threat throughout the fight. And the boss is taunt immune, by the way. Every time the current tank is hit, an acidic wound stack will be applied to him, building up over time. You want one of the off tanks to take over once the main tank has about 15 to 20 stacks. That's around 30 seconds into the fight. Okay, next let's talk about Blood Boil. This is a debuff cast every 10 seconds on the 5 raid members furthest away from Gurtog, and it does stack. If you're a melee, you're not concerned with this, but if you're a caster or a healer, listen up. How you deal with this is you stack everyone near the waterfall outside the water.
Okej, ska man förklara det? Jag vet inte. Jag vet inte vad det är.
Det är så att beskriva det.
Lite som när man är nervös, fast liksom på ett bra sätt.
Liksom ett lyckopirr.
Upp genom benen långsamt.
Typ som när man åker berg och dalbana.
Jag säger bara damn, alltså.
Ja, det är väldigt häftigt när man bara, men det är ju så.
Och när det kommer upp i hjärtat så går det liksom badabom, badabom.
I 50 år alltså.
And have 5 players move to the water. Take Blood Boil, move back to the group, have the next 5 players move to the water, take Blood Boil, etc. And this is easier to do than it sounds, because you can just assign, for example, Group 3 to start in the water. Once Group 3 gets the debuff, the raid lead calls for Group 4 to go in the water, and Group 3 returns and stacks with everyone else. Then, once Group 4 gets it, Group 5 goes in, etc. until the boss transitions into Phase 2. I suggest your raid to practice this before the pull if it's your first time. So Phase 2 happens after the 5th Blood Boil, and it's definitely the most heal-intensive moment of this fight. Have everyone spread out before the 5th Blood Boil happens, because a random player will receive Fell Rage, which will do an AoE damage around the player and will also increase their damage, healing, health, and armor, but they will also be targeted by the boss. The player that received this debuff must stand still and use any damage mitigation abilities they have. Here's a list of all the abilities different classes can use. Healers want to heal that target primarily, because if he or she dies, the boss will go to the tank and probably one-shot him. But on top of that, there's also 15 players with Blood Boil at this point, and also tanks with Acidic Wound, so they must also keep healing other players. This is where most groups wipe. If your healers can manage to get you past this, you'll likely heal the boss. Moving on to Reliquary of Souls. The way to this boss is actually a gauntlet with mobs respawning fast if you lag behind too much, so keep moving quick through this. But once you reach the boss, here's how to deal with it. This is a 3-phase fight, and while each phase is active, you'll have a permanent aura active on every player. During phase 1, it's Aura of Suffering, which reduces healing, regeneration, and armor by 100% and defense by 500. So since no healing is possible, tanks must be rotated during this phase. Thankfully, it's very easy to switch tanks. The way you do it is basically the closest player to the boss will have permanent aggro, so to switch tanks you simply have the off tank step in front of the current tank. Also, every 45 seconds the boss goes into enrage for 15 seconds. Incidentally, a rogue's evasion is also 15 seconds, so it's not a bad idea to have a rogue step close to the boss, take aggro and pop evasion to tank him. You also have a debuff called Soul Drain during this phase, which can and should be dispelled. Once the boss reaches 0 health, you'll transition into phase 2. The transition is marked by a bunch of mobs spawning. They have very low HP and deal almost no damage, so don't worry about them. Use this time to res and buff any tanks that died and get everyone to full HP. Phase 2 is characterized by Aura of Desire, which means that any damage you deal to the boss, 50% of it will be reflected to you. So be mindful to not kill yourself during this phase. Past that, you have Deaden, cast by the boss on the current target and increases damage taken by 100% for 10 seconds on that target. Tanks must spell reflect this back to the boss. Spirit Shock must be interrupted. It deals a huge amount of damage to the tank, and Rune Shield should be spell stealed by a mage or eaten by a Fell Hunter. Finally, we have phase 3. This is characterized by Aura of Anger, which applies an ever-increasing amount of shadow damage every